Hey everybody, welcome to the first tutorial for 3D animation and computer modeling, University of New Haven. We're going to start out this session by learning a little bit about Cinema 4D. So hopefully you've downloaded the application. Today we're going to be building this scene, a snow person, I don't know if it's human, a snow anthropomorphized figure in the landscape, and learn a little bit about the interface of Cinema 4D. Okay, folks, welcome to the basic interface of Cinema 4D. A few things to go over as we navigate around. When you open up a new window, you'll see this. You see there's a set of menus at the top that we can access. Along here, we have tools that we can use for creating models, moving, scaling, things like that, rendering. Over here, we have our controls that allow us to access the different types of model interfaces, so points, edges, polygons. This is our main viewport, and we will be viewing our scenes here, modeling here, etc. When we put something in the viewport, you can click and hold down. This is a primitive object tool, for example, just a cube. It will show up in the viewport. Notice it also shows up in the Objects Manager, and also down below, its attributes show up in the Attributes Manager. Down below, we also have the coordinates here. This is the materials palette. And right here, we have a timeline for when we begin to animate. So when we bring in a new object, first of all, any of these parameters can be adjusted with parametric objects. So if you see a menu screen like this that has a little black arrow, you can click and hold it down, and a variety of different things come up that you can choose. I'm holding down my mouse. When I click on something and let go, it will bring the object into the scene. Now, because it's always going to bring everything in at 0, 0, 0, or in the middle of our object, in the middle of our scene, we have to move one of them out of the way in order to see the other one. Now, in order to navigate the viewport, we have a few options. Up here on each one of the viewports, you'll have this little navigation toolbar. This one, if you click and hold it down, you can pan left, right, up, and down. The next one is zoom. You can zoom in and out, click and hold and move it, move the mouse, and it will zoom in and out. And then finally, the rotate tool. If you click and hold that down, you can rotate the models around. So this allows you to place multiple objects in the scene and rotate them around. You'll notice that I can select between them in the Objects Manager. So then here I can change the attributes. If I make this 100 instead of 200, it will change its scale. All right. And if I select the sphere, I can do the same. I can change the attributes here as well. Maybe I make this 50 instead of 100, and I have a smaller sphere. So you can navigate between the objects in the Object Manager. You can also do it by clicking on them back and forth. Okay. So this allows us to use multiple different objects, zoom in and out of the scene, change their attributes here if they're parametric objects, and then also navigate between them in the Object Manager. One thing you'll notice about the Object Manager is I can group objects as well. So I could take the sphere and actually put it inside of the cube. It doesn't really put it inside of it, but it kind of creates like a folder. So now if I were to take the cube and move it, the sphere would move with it because it's grouped. It's kind of like a parent-child relationship here, the way that we consider it. So the hierarchy there becomes grouped in that way. Another way to do this, if I take this out, if I just drag it out here, is to click Shift and select them both, and then go to Object and Group. And what that does is create what's called a null. And the null is like a folder in a sense. When we click it open, we can see both of those in there. And so I can click on the null and again, move it. Command Z brings it back, or you can use the undo and redo keys here. And I can do things with a null. For example, I can scale it and they'll both scale up together, right? Or they'll both rotate together. Okay, so that's a way that we can have controls of multiple objects. So when we start out in modeling, we're actually going to be like building blocks, right? We're going to be compiling different primitive objects together to make our larger scene. Okay, so what we're working with today, I have another window open, and you can navigate between the windows by simply going to Window, and here's my snow person Cinema 4D scene. This is one that I've created. This is the overall view, the editor view, or when we're working on it. If we want to see what this really looks like, we're going to use these rendering keys up here. The one on the left right here is the render view. This gives us the render of what we're looking at right now. So if I click this, it's going to take a minute to render. It's going to go kind of frame by, or piece by piece in the composition, render it all out based on the lighting and the scene and the textures and everything that I have to give me a final view of what it would look like if I did render it to a JPEG, a PNG, a TIFF, even a movie file, MP4, MOV, or something like that. Okay, so this is directly what we're working with now. If I click out of this, you'll notice it changes back to the editor view. So if I click anywhere here, I go back to the editor view, which looks significantly different. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our snow person. I'm going to break this up into a few different segments so it's not so long. We're going to start with the modeling, then we'll work into some of the texturing, and then we'll work into the lighting and the scene. So to create a new file, I'm just going to simply click Command N, create a new object here. So for my snow person, I'm going to start with a sphere, all right? And this sphere, I'm going to add in here. I'm going to keep the coordinates as is. One thing to notice about this, and the way that you can see the polygons that it generates, if you go to display and shading with lines, garage shading with lines, you can see the polygons. Now, I want this to be a little smoother when it renders. There's a few ways you can do that, but I'm going to just go here and change the segments. So from 16 segments, I'm going to make this 72. And watch what happens to the polygons. We get a lot more polygons and the look becomes a lot smoother. So that's something to remember. We're effectively increasing the resolution of the sphere by doing so. So I'm going to get out of the shading with lines because I don't need to see them as I'm modeling. But this gives me the base of my snow figure. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit and simply take this sphere, hit Command C, Command V. It's going to paste the same exact size sphere on top of the original sphere, so I don't really see anything until I move it. So I'm just going to move this up, and then I'm going to scale it. Now, a few ways you can scale when it's a parametric object, and I'll talk about going to the difference between parametric and editable objects, but I can grab this little toolbar right here, this little handlebar, it's a circle, and I can click that and just drag it, and it's going to scale it down. All right, so that could be the midsection of the snow human. I'm going to hit Command C and Command V again, and bring up another one and do the same thing. Click and hold that little circle down and drag it in to make the head. Okay, and then because this is far too symmetrical to look naturalistic, I'm just going to move these around a little bit. Now, when you move, you can click the arrows. So if I click this arrow right here and drag up, I can move it just along that axis. The axes that we're working with, green is Y, X is red, and Z is blue. So that's our 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z, okay? If I grab these little handlebars, notice how 2 of them highlight. So in this case, now I have the Y and the Z selected, and if I move this, it's only gonna move along that parameter, right? So if I move that here, I have a little bit more off center. And if I click to the sphere, and I move this one over a little bit and maybe drag it down a little bit, then I've got a little bit more kind of slumping over, more naturalistic looking snow human, okay? So that's our basic structure that we're working with so far. I've got and then I'm gonna label these, right? So here, this is the base. So I'm just gonna double click that, the word itself, and just type base, okay? This one, I'm gonna double click it and just type mid. And then this one, double click and just head. And that kind of keeps me organized a little bit as I go through. Okay, what I need next is a nose. So I'm gonna find the closest shape to a nose. You can use any shape you want. I'm gonna go ahead and use a cone. So bring the cone in. It's far too large, first of all, and the direction is wrong. So what's great about using parametric objects is you can change things like orientation. So right now it's Y plus, or plus Y. And that means it's going up above 0 along the Y axis, right? So if I change that to, let's say, maybe I want it along this blue axis, right? So that's Z. I do plus Z, well, that's the wrong way. I'll do minus Z. Then I have this cone in the right direction, right? I'm going to bring this up about to where it would exist on this snow person's head, and then I'll scale it down, all right? So I'm just moving using the navigation, and I'm gonna scale it down manually. So the bottom radius is far too big at 100. Let's try 10. Not too bad. And then the height is way too big with 200. So I'm just gonna try 15. Let's see what that looks like. It's inside of the head right now, so I'm gonna drag it out using this move tool. Oh, well, that's too short. So let's make it 25, 30, let's say, and 8. That looks better. Okay, that's a bit more of a carrot nose. Again, if you don't like these parameters, you can always hit the scale tool. And then again, you can drag any one of these, or you can click anywhere outside the viewport, click and hold, and it will drag all 3 of them together. So I'm just gonna scale that out. All right, that's not bad. Now with the position of this head, I don't think the nose would be hanging up so much. So I'm just gonna click this rotate tool and drag it down just a little bit so that I get that slumping down ever so slightly. Okay, and then I'm gonna give this figure a couple of eyes. We'll use the head to help us do that. I'm gonna copy and paste and then shrink this down quite a bit. Okay, and I will move it out for an eye. Okay, something like that. Copy, paste, move, and arrange it, maybe a little slumped. The thing to remember is that you want to make sure you look at it at all views, because it might look like it's connected, but actually it's not. So I'm going to move that over in there. Okay, I've got my snow figure here. And the last thing I'm going to do with this scene is give it a little bit of a landscape, all right? There is a landscape tool in the parametric objects landscape. So if I click and bring this in, I get a basic landscape. This is great, but it's not going to be big enough. If I really want to have this look like a naturalistic scene, I have to make it quite a bit bigger. So I'm going to go from 600 centimeters by 600 centimeters to 2500, tab, 2500 to get a much bigger scene. I'm also going to raise this up a little bit. So let's say 250. Try that. This is all experimentation, by the way. I'm just guessing with numbers, see how it looks, and then I'll adjust it along the way. So when I back out of the scene, then I can see how my snow figure is working in the scene. So I'm just going to lower the landscape so it's a bit more in there. And then I'm going to adjust this. Now, with this landscape scene is based on some algorithmic math, all right? And I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's based on these maps that are used, and we can change them, which is cool. So if you look down here where it says seed, if I click this, I can adjust the numbers. So this is a different pattern. This is a different pattern, right? So my suggestion for you is if you're ever using something like the landscape or any object or anything that has this seed function, don't use 0. Everybody in the world is going to use 0. So I'm going to make this 654. Why not? Okay. Or maybe this one's better. 655. Okay, so I've got this in place. I'm going to move the landscape around, something like that. Looks a little bit better. And now I've got my basic scene. I'm going to zoom into where I want it to be, navigate it, rotate it a little bit, and this looks pretty good. The last thing that I'll mention is, again, this idea of grouping. What I'm going to do is select all of these objects. I'm going to hit Shift, click up to head here. Okay, actually, first I'm going to take this and call it I left, and L. Okay, select all these folks, go to Object, Group Objects, double click this, and call it Snow Pat. I'm going to name my snowman Pat. Okay. And now if I need to, I can make subtle adjustments to Pat. Maybe Pat needs to be slumped over a little bit more. There we go. I like that better. A little hungover snow Pat. Okay, so there we go. And this is the basics of modeling, right? We are using primitive objects, assembling them together. naming them, rotating them, scaling them, grouping them to create a scene that we're eventually going to use. If I render this out right now, it's totally going to be black and white and gray, but we're going to add textures, colors, light in the next video. So that's all for part 1.1. We'll move on to part 1.2 in the next video.